Tracy, California, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, of course back home in Nigeria, South Africa, London, everywhere.
Do you see that bright sky? It's only you, star, and I believe in you. And girls and young boys, listen to what I have to say. Dreams are manifested by you. Striving makes them come true. But nothing.
My name is Rich Ochek. I'm the founder of Horizon Herbs LLC. We're growers of medicinal herbs and specifically medicinal herb seeds. I was asked to speak a little bit about some of the roots of my interest in medicinal herbs. And I have to say that it goes all the way back to around 1972 when I made my way as an undergraduate to do some work in the Rift Valley in Kenya as a young budding archaeologist.
Here we go. Hello, sir. I was wondering if you could help me.
I spent 3 years in the Rift Valley, and it was quite fascinating to see the way that people lived. A Maasai warrior would put a little cow's blood and milk into a gourd and start walking towards Ngorongoro and not worry about following any roads and make his own path. And this sense of openness and freedom was quite fascinating to me, having grown up in Western society. So after about 3 years of digging in later Stone Age settlements where we found some really fascinating things, obsidian tools, hippopotamus burials, evidence of the way humans were subsisting on the planet in the later Stone Age time, then I took a vacation on the coast of Kenya in a place called Malindi. And the coolness of the area next to the Indian Ocean and the palm trees and the white sands and the beguiling turquoise waters of the Indian Ocean really won me away from old stones and bones and obsidian tools, and I became more and more awakened to the green world around me. I began to do investigations into Cocos nucifera, the coconut, and all the different ways that was used by the native people. Everything from toothbrushes to antibacterial medicines to making wine from the effluence of the nectar from the top of the coconut tree. And I realized that I was really more interested in peoples and plants and the green living world than I was in old bones, stones, and potsherds. And so upon returning to the United States in 1975, I began gardening. It was a sort of a catch-up maneuver because it seemed like at that time just about everybody was going back to the land. So I learned more and more about growing vegetable gardens and how to cut firewood and keep myself warm in the winter, and eventually moved with my small budding family to Oregon, where we lived in the Coast Mountains, and I planted over 100,000 trees over the next 5 years as a tree planter. All the time that I was planting trees, I was also aware of the forest around me and was collecting medicinal herbs from the forest and learning about things like Oplopanax horridum or the Devil's Club and how the native people had used it. I was at the same time reading substantially from whatever herbal references were available at the time. Maud Greaves' Herbal was a mainstay, and I would read that at night until I got too weary and fell asleep. Then woke up in the middle of the night and ate oatmeal to replenish my my tree planter's body and then go back early in the morning into the drizzle and plant more trees. Finally, seeking more and more human contact, my wife and then 3 children, one of them was still suckling on the breast, moved to southern Oregon. And at that time, we began cultivating medicinal herbs in earnest and investigated all of the different fantastic sounding medicinal herbs that could be grown in gardens, including things like arnica and marshmallow and yarrow. And we put the plants to all these amazing names. Valerian, what did that look like? What did it smell like? How did one find the seed in the first place? Once finding the seed, how did one plant it? How did one grow it? How much did the bees love it? And ultimately, what could we do with it to improve our own state as humans? Basically building up our own resources and energy without asking for our medicine from any expert, just taking it from the earth and moving it upwards and into our body, and how strong that made us feel and how independent.
Oregano. Here's some more. Rosemary. It's watered from above.
Yeah, and it's a special.
It's actually pretty labor intensive. They think that the only reason you'd want to have a wall, an herb wall, is because you didn't have ground to plant your herbs. So you had to go up and sit it out. Pretty neat. It's beautiful in the summer. It's really
Dreams are manifested by you. Striving makes them come true.
We got garlic growing over here. Lettuces. That's another one of my favorites.
I know how it feels to work hard. Turn around and get nothing
Very good. These are pomegranates. But these are dwarf pomegranates. They have wonderful flowers, don't they? Yeah. That's really good.
Do you see that bright sky? It's your only limit. You're a star. You're a star, and I believe in you. Do you see that bright sky? It's your only limit. You're a star. You're a star, and I believe in you.
Years passed and we continued to collect medicinal herb seeds. After a while, we came up with quite an inventory, several hundred different kinds of seeds that were stored in screw-top jars underneath our bed. We always said during those days that we didn't have much money, but our seeds definitely had a lot of love.
Well, this is my first time here as a member of the Atlanta Botanical Gardens. But I came to the Garden Lights last year and loved it so much I was inspired to get a membership to come back this year. And it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. It's my first time and I'm coming as her guest.
And how do you plan to take advantage of your membership?
Well, I look forward to coming back again during the Garden Lights exhibit. And I can't wait to come in the spring. Then there's more in bloom.
Have you seen the orchids?
We did.
We did. They were very, very pretty.
And so fragrant.
Smelled very nice.
Then we began to produce lists of these seeds and sell them out to gardeners who had some interest in it. For about a decade, there was mild interest in our activities. And then around the year 2004, things began to pick up. More and more young people were learning about herbs in various herbal schools. There was more and more, it's the information age, there was more and more information available on the internet and through herbal programs, education programs. I began to write my own books which sort of supplemented the information that the plants themselves were giving out to the people. And horizon herbs grew and grew. We ended up, to this day, producing over 1,000 different species of medicinal herb plants, which we are disseminating out to healing gardens all over the world. And we feel that this green energy is significantly helping the earth and helping move us towards a positive future where we can be independent and where we can prevent disease before it becomes a deleterious entity, and where we can continue to oxygenate our environment, diversify plant life, and therefore support all beings from the lowliest gnat up into the human beings.
I've been the executive director here for about 7.5 years. And what's the role is always a challenging question for a director. I always say we carry the baton, right? So I have the batons and the staff and the board are all the symphony to make the music around here. I'm obviously responsible for the direction and the vision for the garden, as is the board of directors, and for overseeing our capital expansion plans. But one of the things that when I came to the garden, I was brought here to do is really broaden the garden's public profile and make sure that people in all parts of our community got to enjoy the Atlanta Botanical Garden. And one of the ways to do that is with exhibitions and special events and programs. And so I've been here 7.5 years. In the last 7.5 years, we've done some major exhibitions. And of course, this is really the pinnacle of most of our exhibitions. They're all different and we're all wonderful, but this Henry Moore exhibition is really so prestigious for Atlanta and for the garden. And we've just done a lot of public programming that bring people to this garden, whether they're gardeners or they're art lovers or they're families, or they're just people who want to get away from the stress of the environment around them. So we've done a lot in 7.5 years, and I'm just part of the team. One of the things I get asked a lot is why sculpture in a garden? And I always turn it around and say, when did we ever take art and sculpture out of a garden? It's as old as the millennia. So you've often and always seen, whether it's Europe or Asia or other parts of the world, art paired with beautiful gardens. So when I came here, it just seemed like a natural fit to bring art to the garden. And we started doing the work, and I think it surprised people in the community. They really hadn't envisioned the garden with work of this scale, for one thing, and of these kinds of artists, the caliber of these kinds of artists.
Henry Moore is one of the most prominent, well-respected, well-known sculptors of the 20th century. When you're dealing with an artist of this caliber, if you just look around and look at how well suited the pieces are to the outdoors, because that in fact was Henry Moore's goal, that they be sited in the outdoors. There's just a natural synergy there. And I think that this institution was, and this garden was particularly appealing to the Henry Moore Foundation because it is more a series of intimate spaces rather than wide open landscapes. So it was something that appealed to them because it's very, very different from any other venue that this artwork has ever been shown in before. You can imagine one of the challenges is just purely logistics. How do you get work here of this scale from England to the United States, from New York to Atlanta, and then out again? So logistically, it is very, very challenging. And but then you have the issue of how you get it actually into the garden. A garden that was not designed for pieces of work that weigh 15,000 pounds. But maybe even more importantly than that, we have to look at how the work integrates into the garden from a visual perspective. We're very careful about placement of art. We want the art to be perfect in the garden, but we want the garden to really shine as much as the art. So that's a logistical and rather a fun challenge for us. But then the final piece of it is, how do you put major pieces of art like this one in the bog garden and not ruin this plant collection and not compress the soil and compact the soil?
what I think is wonderful about this installation is that it is very much in keeping with what Henry Moore, I think, ideally would have wanted to, the situation that he would have wanted to see these works in. They're absolutely perfectly installed. They look like they belong here. And it's also a way for people to experience these works in their totality in a very relaxed, comfortable environment. There's not a preconceived notion for how you're supposed to respond to sculpture when you're in a botanic garden as opposed to being in a museum where people tend to bring a lot of preconceived notions in the doors with them about how they're to respect and relate to artworks.
One of the, just overarching ideas is that Henry Moore was really the first sculptor to create fine art that was intended to be displayed out of doors. And we forget about that sometimes because it's so common now to see fine art in gardens or outdoor sculpture parks attached to museums. But really, he was revolutionary at creating that trend, and that's distinct from creating garden ornaments and garden monument. To actually create fine art for display in the out of doors was somewhat revolutionary. So that instantly is sort of a connection. And then, as he worked with natural forms, whether it be a stone or a seashell or an elephant head, things that inspired him to create art in certain forms and to put certain forms together. It's very much, in some ways we look at it and it's the way that you look at creating a landscape as well, where you're working with forms and things that move you emotionally. And he is sculpting with bronze and we're somewhat sculpting the landscape with plants.
I think that this is a beautiful example of public art, and I love the way that sculpture and the garden are really working together. In our work as public architects, as public artists, we really are interested in that experience, and I think that what's unique specifically about this work is the way that you discover in these kind of vignetted views, sometimes capturing views of the city, sometimes in very intimate garden spaces. Each piece is placed in a way that it can be experienced at multiple angles within the garden space. And as a design solution, it really has to grow from public needs rather than our needs. Our needs are actually their needs reinterpreted. And so I think that's what true public art is all about. It's really understanding that and reinterpreting the problem that's actually there.
Moore thought of his sculptures as a journey, and that as you move around them, or in some cases even move through them and underneath them, your vantage point changes and parts begin to overlap and pieces come together and you find these wonderfully dynamic areas of tension, and you cannot experience that fully until you are in a situation where you can really move around a piece. And in this installation, in many cases, not only were people allowed to photograph the pieces, but they were allowed to touch them. And sculpture is such a tactile medium that I felt, and I think most of the people who have experienced this here in Atlanta have felt that it really lent a whole other level of appreciation to these works. Even if you don't like the way they look or understand why they're here, it's a wonderful thing to be able to live with sculpture in the same way that we live with the natural environment. And the fusion of those two elements was at the core of what Henry Moore had hoped to do with these large-scale works, and I think it was just beautifully executed here. And what a great thing for this city.
When you look at this, you will get the idea that this piece of art is planted in this ground the same way all the other plants are planted in the ground. This piece of art, by definition, then, is rooted in nature. And for a child to understand that a piece of art is rooted in nature, it's coming full circle. Understanding that we took all these materials from Earth and then molded them with our hands, and now we're bringing them back to nature. And so this is an excellent idea that an African can understand, because Africans live in nature and that pieces of art also live in nature. You wouldn't have to get an African child to go to a special place to find nature in art or art in nature. Here, the shape, the curved shape of the sculpture reminds me very well of African symbolism of fertility.
Well, I think as all of his colleagues were, Moore was particularly fascinated with Africa. Not just the art of Africa, but Africa as a continent. It was one of the very few places he never actually traveled to, and he would collect objects, artifacts. He had people bring him bones back, anything that he could gather from Africa. So I think there was a specific connection there. In terms of the influence of the other non-Western cultures, I know that there are some figures in the garden here that are sort of totemic figures that look as if they're derived from maybe Pacific Northwestern American Indians. They're actually more closely related to Jamaican figures. This interest in the art of cultures that were non-Westernized, so non-European cultures, was something that was very widespread, particularly in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s throughout Europe. And as I mentioned, the reason for that is that artists were really looking for a couple of things. Spiritually, they were looking for a much more simple, or what they perceived as simple way of life. Now, certainly these cultures aren't simple, but when you're looking out onto something else, you tend to project that this is a very idyllic type of lifestyle. And then aesthetically, the art of non-Western cultures, specifically South American, Egyptian, and African artworks are very, very geometric. They're very symmetrical, and they're very pared down. It's at the very heart of modernist abstraction. It's taking the least amount of information, be it shape or line or texture, to convey an idea, specifically when you're dealing with the human form. And so you see more translating that pared down abstract aesthetic that he's seeing in the art of these non-Western cultures, and he's transforming it into something that's very much his own. He's combining it with classical ideals.
The longer I've lived with Henry Moore's work in the garden, the more I love it. When we were talking just today is this cool kind of English day. It's cool in the fall and the colors are beautiful. And the patinas on these pieces today, they just glisten. They're stunning. You can see every streak of turquoise and that bronze that he, painstakingly worked on to make that happen. And I'm looking at a piece over here with this beautiful texture. They've just become a part of my heart and soul right now. I'm already mourning the Henry Moore exhibit leaving, and that is a really difficult thing that people don't maybe even think about. For us, we live with this work every single day, and when it leaves a hole. It really does. We're going to miss it.
enjoy about volunteering is like today, seeing all these people, seeing how much they enjoy the flowers, plants, how appreciative they are, particularly of it being in the middle of the city. I'm a retired teacher, so I enjoy the teaching part of it too, leading tours, especially with children, and it's just a beautiful place to volunteer.
I'm going to see all the beautiful plants and flowers.
Once a month, a professional in the garden gives us a talk, and it could be about the rainforest or the orchids or the medicinal plants, and you get to learn a lot. It's one of the nicer perks of being a volunteer. I especially like the rainforest. I call it that avatar effect. A little bit spooky, but it's really different in there. I like that part. People think we have a recording going of the frogs, but we don't need a recording. They're so loud in there. But I love the effect of the lights. The ones that are in color are the poison ones. And they get their poison from the plants they would eat in the wild. We don't feed them those plants, so they're technically not poisonous anymore. But we are doing conservation with them because in their native habitat, there is a virus that's killing them off. We do a certain amount of conservation. Like I said, anything that becomes endangered, like many of our plants in the bog area. So that's one of our conservation areas, is all those bog plants back there. But we have others, and most of them are endangered because their habitat is being taken over. So that is one of our goals, to conserve where we can. The Venus flytrap are in that area. The kids have heard of them, but they've never seen them. A Venus flytrap's about that big. And he's got what looks a little bit like teeth, little jagged edge, and he closes after 5 seconds if something lands on him. But he's very, very small. And I tell the kids, look for what looks like little teeth. That's how you'll know it's a Venus flytrap. The white ones are pitcher plants, and in those, the insects go down in there and can't get back out. The orchids are not carnivorous, though, but these pitcher plants are. That's how they get nutrients. Because of the water underneath the soil, they don't get all the nutrients they need. They get washed away. So nature's answer is for them to use the nutrients out of the insects. And the kids are always very intrigued by that, so they can't wait to find them. So I love showing them those kinds of things they may have heard about but never seen. And in the cactus over there, prickly pears, which by the way you can use some prickly pear preserves. It goes back to plants have a lot of uses, things we don't even think about. And making jelly out of something that looks like that, it doesn't even look like what we would call a piece of fruit. Yeah, those are the kinds of things I like showing the kids.
I work with the Department of Natural Resources. We work on restoring habitats where the plants live, so we cut out the invasive species or cut out shrubs, protect the water, and then the gardens here grow rare plants that live in those habitats, and we can take those plants and put them back where they used to be in the wilds. This is actually a leaf. It's like a tube. Can you flip that? The bugs crawl down in here, and there's water, and it's got enzymes, like kind of what your stomach has. That is a plant called Helonius. It's like a lily. That's a lot of it. It is. And this plant grows in bogs with pictured plants too. So they grow together.
Did you pet the snake? No? Did Daddy He can lick you? Look at all these He licked me. I would definitely like to hold this.
Very brave. You want to touch him? She'll let you touch him.
Yeah. They're very shy snakes. They live underground. They don't come out very often. And this one is, I think it's on the list for it. You did such a great job.
On my family genealogy, what else do you talk about with the bald eagle? But I want him to get my voice infection, so if I'm here standing talking with him, he won't get that excited. Why do you do that?
I was scared.
No, because it's good. Why is it that color? Because what it eats, very good. Why is there not a real good solid material in there? Bald eagles, birds of prey, they can't digest bones or fur. So they actually will throw those back up in a casting or an owl pellet. Thank you. Good time. How many of y'all have ever heard of Benjamin Franklin? What do you have to do with the eagle? Yeah, why?
You're trying to get a pond. He didn't want the pond.
Yeah, they're scavengers. And he actually saw the eagle stealing food from another bird. And this is what he said, this is a direct quote. That's a bird of low moral characteristics.
He died.
But he was outvoted, he sure was. This bird's still being protected in Georgia. We've protected them so well that now, I believe in Georgia there's over 120 nesting grounds. So that's kind of neat. And they're all over the place. The coast, they're all over the place. They build on the same nest almost for life. And there was a nest that was found in Connecticut that was 2,000 pounds. So 3 of us could lay down in it. He was not there, sure.
She likes strawberries.
Yeah, she likes strawberries. And plums.
Thank goodness.
And any kind of real green leafy vegetables. This female's about 40 years old.
40? She's not that good. She's had a crush.
She got hit by a car about 15 years ago. Wow. So, but she gets around okay. I mean, she's a little slow, but tortoises are slow, so it's all right. I go for tortoise. Yeah, because they live on the land. That's kind of the difference between a tortoise and a turtle. They're both turtles, but a tortoise is one that lives on the land. And you can kind of tell from her back feet, they're like little elephant feet, that, turn this way, that she's not a water turtle. If she was an aquatic turtle, she'd have real web-like feet.
Dry environments. Do you see she blends? You think she blended well in this environment? He's just got those nice hairs. That's cool. Well, she really likes strawberries.
If you'd like to touch Saphira, can you give me 2 fingers? It's your scientific 2-finger touch just on the back. Just like that. This is Saphira. She's a bearded dragon.
She's very pretty.
Yeah, she's very pretty.
They come from Africa.
She's calm. Wow.
Just on the back, close to the edge.
She was born in captivity, I guess.
Yeah. Have you guys ever lost a tooth? Not yet? Not yet. Not yet. But what happens is you have your teeth and they don't grow anymore once they're in your mouth. But an elephant's teeth, they're always growing and they're always getting worn down because they're always eating really, really tough plants. They're eating a lot of different plants that are really hard on the teeth. They break the teeth a little bit over time, so they constantly grow new and it keeps getting longer and longer and longer.
Alligators have Yes, that's right. That's right. They are considered threat. He's very wild and he doesn't hang out with humans. If anything comes his way, he's ready to go. It's not that bad.
Really?
Yeah, the musk involves in the carapace of the shell that actually dated back to the Civil War.
A poisonous animal is one that'll deliver its toxin just by touching it or by swallowing it. So poison ivy or some insects, like your scorpions, spiders, stingrays. Yeah, it has to get in contact with the bloodstream.
Get on the mailing list. He's an eastern screech owl, and you can see that one of his pupils doesn't function. He is quiet for a screech owl. This is Wendy. She's a lady. Yep. Oh, she was actually a grown-up when we got her a couple of years ago. So, these are both native to Georgia, and this is a barn owl. So these birds are just not releasable to go back out into the wild.
Yeah.
The nature of their injuries means that they wouldn't be able to function so well in the wild. Birds have hollow bone, so when they get broken, they calcify in position really, really quickly. And if you don't get to the injury and don't set it properly in time, it'll calcify in the wrong position, which is why she's got, it looks like her right wing droops. We're a rescue, rehabilitation, and release facility. So any injured or orphaned wildlife, someone can bring us reptiles, mammals, birds. We'll take care of it until it's ready to go back out into the wild.
a member of the Atlanta Botanical Garden for about 15 years, and when I retired from Emory University, I decided to start volunteering here, and that was the first volunteer assignment that I gave myself, and I've now volunteered other places too, but this is my very favorite because all of the volunteers here are good-hearted people, and all of the staff at the Atlanta Botanical Garden are also very dedicated to the garden and to the community of Atlanta. And that's why I like it here.
I enjoy being a volunteer at the Botanical Garden. We get to see all the lovely flowers, and there's something in bloom all season long. There are things that bloom in the wintertime. We have a winter garden, as well as the summer blooms. And it's just a great place to work. People are so enjoyable here, and I just couldn't think of a nicer place to be anywhere on earth.
It's so beautiful here. Why wouldn't you want to come here every day? And the people are wonderful. I have made so many good friends here. So the people and the beauty, and it's just plain fun. And I've been a volunteer here for a long time.
I love volunteering. This is one of the most beautiful gardens in this country and possibly in the world.
Do we have tickets already? Hi. If you look like you have your tickets, they'll just scan it in.
I'm coming.
I love being around people, and I love to be around beautiful things like plants, and the trees and the lights at Christmas time are so wonderful that it just brings out the child in me. And if I can help the city, welcome people into the garden, I'll take the opportunity. So that's why I volunteer.
Do you see that bright sky? It's your only limit. You're a star, and I believe in you. Young girls and young boys, listen to what I have to say. Dreams are manifested by you. Striving makes them come true. But nothing comes easy. 'Cause if it was, it wouldn't be worth it. I know how it feels to work hard, turn around and get nothing more. With God on your side, faith will help keep your hopes alive.
Children's docent here at the garden. I'm a retired school teacher, elementary school, and I enjoy giving the children's tours and enjoying the solace of actually standing here at the garden. Can I please get you on all? Sure. Sure, they're for you. You didn't have one? You can help you on your journey. It's wonderful, aren't they? I enjoy being here. Special place. It's my third year in retirement, and since I'm retired, I'm here working as a docent. I'd like a better picture of the orchids I can move.
I pray the Lord give you the strength to. I know that
I just taught how to make a smoke.
The good, I want to do a marshmallow, Diana.
Do you see that bright sky? Surrounding ocean. Only sky, I believe in you. Do you see that bright sky? Surrounding ocean. Only sky,
Technique, marshmallow. Don't enter the stick. Put it in the fire. Some people like it burnt. Some people just like it brown. I prefer mine burnt to a crisp. Blow it out. On your cracker, you have a piece of chocolate. You put your marshmallow, another cracker on top, pull the stick out, and the heat from the marshmallow melts the chocolate. They're great. I've been volunteering here for about 2.5 years. I'm a country boy. I grew up in the country. I like being outside. I like learning about plants, and I like the people. The people are probably the most important. I've developed a lot of friendships here. And when you come to the garden, it's just like, I always say, if you're in a bad mood, you need to go to the garden. You have to, you cannot be in a bad mood. It kind of brings me kind of peace. And it's just so serene. Great place to be.
Aquí, allá, otro ahí también. Let it go. Dale, come on. Oh, vale. Will's here.
Get a ticket. Everybody's happy.
All aboard.
You're a star, and I believe in you. You see that bright sky? It's surrounding me. It's my own. Good job. A friend once told me, girl, shoot for the moon. And if you don't make it to the moon, land among the stars.
Homo sapiens sapiens, double sapien monkey.
Whatever you want to do, I pray the Lord give you strength to. Oh, I know that you can do. Do you see that bright sky? Surrounding you.
I've learned that I am the author and the finisher of my actions, but simply the co-pilot in my destiny. I've received my direction and chosen my path. And now I'll fly. I'll run. I'll go and be. For I have angels on my side. Sir, I was wondering if you could help me ask God if he could make my brother or my mom my guardian angel.